I can't believe that shit. I can't believe it's all like that. Fucking pass it over then, dude. I've been waiting all day for that bad Ronald, man.
Welcome to Buck Life, the Milwaukee Bucks fan podcast, made by hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans for hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans. My name is Jacob Anderson. With me today, as always, is my co-host Chuck Schilling. Welcome, Chuck.
How you doing today, Jake? It's a little cold out there. We're on All-Star weekend here, so we got a brief break from the misery that is being Bucks fans.
I was just gonna say,
to watch the charade that is the NBA All-Star game.
I needed this break, particularly after these last two wins. I mean, anybody that listens to this show knows that I'm all about the Bucks tanking at this point, losing as much as possible and trying to get a higher draft pick. And these last two wins, as you said, Chuck, were just the brutal type of wins for people that have the mindset like you and I have.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't mind, when I'm watching the Bucks, it's easy to get caught up in the moment. Oh, they win, exciting win or whatever. But when you have a 21-point deficit and you come back to win it, you're on
by 1 point.
By 1 point.
On stupid off-the-ball fouls, and, I don't know what the hell was going on at the end of that Boston game.
Against a team that is, in theory, going to be fighting with you for draft position. I know the Celtics are in position to make the playoffs. I believe as of right now they'd be in the playoffs. And I think they'll hang on to that. But still, these are the teams you need to lose to improve your draft stock. They're on a 3-game. They lost all 3 games out on the West Coast. They come home to win 2 games. The worst part, not just the wins in terms of what that means for the end of the season, but I have the fear that maybe the executives, they think they figured something out bringing Greg Monroe off the bench, which actually isn't the worst idea from a wins and losses standpoint. But I don't want them to make a win-now trade. So this next week, as we're recording, we're 5 days out from the trade deadline. It's actually 3:15 p.m., so almost exactly 5 days from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, 5 days. I count how many days. Make sure I'm right here.
And he used his fingers,
and
too.
I used my fingers. I got to use my fingers to count to 5.
I use my fingers a lot, too. My wife's in the other room, so I'm not going to elaborate.
Yeah. That's a friendly reminder, this is not a kid-friendly show. Much like Deadpool, we are rated R, and we earned that rating.
It's soon to be X, so we're waiting to bust that
So,
out.
it's I hope in the next 5 days when, the trade deadline is passed and we're likely recording another episode, that we are not disappointed that we made some sort of stupid win-now trade. Time will tell. The owners and the current regime earned a lot of respect for me last trade deadline, but everything they earned that I had there was gone when they did the Vasquez trade and the other moves they made this offseason. So as good as the trade deadline was last year, the offseason was equally bad, and I just don't know what I'm going to get, and I fear for the worst because I'm a Bucks fan, and for my entire life we have learned to fear for the worst.
Well, and like I said, I keep having these visions that this season is just barreling towards worst-case scenario, which is just narrowly missing out on the playoffs and then not getting a good draft pick to make up for anything, really. These last 2 wins, if you want to be excited about them, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with liking any kind of win because they say a win is a win, but you talk about 2 teams that just out-terribled us, for lack of a better term. Washington was just brutal shooting, particularly John Wall, who also had like a baker's dozen's worth of turnovers. And then the Boston game, as he said, you blow a 21-point lead in the... it was up to 21 in the late third, and then...
You say lead when you really, deficit, really.
Well, right, that tank victory was in the bag, and then you snatch it from the jaws of victory. See, I'm all confused. I don't even know what to say.
You snap that defeat from the jaws of victory.
Right, and the timing couldn't have been worse in my eyes as far as the front office is concerned, because I think a lot of people believe Jason Kidd is the general manager, and if you would have lost those last 2 games, like you very well could have lost both, now you're going in at 12 games under the 500 mark rather than 10, which maybe doesn't sound like the biggest difference, but it's a 2-game winning streak, and now maybe these guys are thinking, we've got something going here, even though they were pretty brutal victories. you have the lineup changes and that. So maybe that is the kind of thing that convinces them to do more of a win now trade. I've always preached this. These mid-season wins, for people, even people that agree with me that tanking is the right way to go, a lot of times will say like, oh, it's one win here, it's one win there. What's that going to matter in the long run? But it does matter. And even if you're not like, say, in the top 3 or top 5 chances to win the lottery or to get a top 3 pick, draft slots do matter. I was arguing with a lot of people on the Milwaukee Bucks Real GM fan forum this week, pretty much saying that same thing, that, and you hear it almost every draft, that once you hit this point in the draft, like after the top 3 players, the drop off from number 4 to number 15, it's not that great. Well, that's just a stupid way of thinking, because there always is one case where and it seems like it's the Bucks that miss out on a potential stud by 2-3 picks because we got a few more basically meaningless wins throughout the season. And just there's a few examples off the bat. The year there was Gordon Hayward and Paul George went back-to-back at picks 9 and 10, and Ed Davis and Xavier Henry were picks 13 and 14. So there's your few picks, or the one that might really hurt Bucks fans, and the second time that we should have maybe had this player, but Steph Curry goes number 7 in his draft, and 3 picks later we pick Brandon Jennings. So we all know how that turned out. 2 times we passed on getting Steph Curry now. But so draft slotting does matter, even if you're not talking about first pick, second pick, third pick. All the way down through the lottery, that matters. So, and especially, you can get jumped too. So if you get jumped and you have the 4th worst record, it's a lot better than getting jumped when you have the 8th worst record.
There's a lot of reasons to want a better pick. Targeting better players. Maybe you want to move back. Maybe the guy you want's not there. You can get more to move back from a higher draft position too. In the NBA, I'm not generally a fan of moving back. The NFL, it has much more value to me.
Sure, it rarely happens in the NBA.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm certainly advocating for, but you always want to maximize your assets. And when you're not going to make the playoffs, your asset is your first-round pick. That's what you get out of the season. Some teams will make the playoffs. Someone's going to win the championship. They're going to get the playoff experience. They're going to have exciting games, whatever. But when you don't make the playoffs, your reward is that first-round pick. And you want to maximize that asset. Because it is, make no mistake, that a first-round pick is an asset. And when you're not in the playoffs, you have some control over where that's going to be, and you want it to be a better pick, whether that's for a player, for trade value, whatever the case may be, you want that higher pick. And, the absolute worst case is where we've been many years, picking 12th, picking 15th, picking 10th. Mm-hmm. And yes, we got lucky and we got Giannis at that point, but
you don't see that very often.
Go over the entire draft. It's so rare to get a player of that caliber at that position in the draft. Yes, there are examples of second-round draft picks turning into legit players. Wesley Matthews and stories like that. The Spurs,
Draymond Green.
Yeah, the Spurs have hit a couple of them. But overall, when you look at the All-Stars, they are generally top 5, top 3 picks. There's a reason. The scouting in the NBA is pretty good, and we know who's got the potential. Now, the opposite side of that is having those picks doesn't necessarily mean you get a stud out of it. We've got some question marks about Jabari, which we'll address too. He's number 2. Is he going to be there? But at least we maximized our odds to get there that year, completely on accident.
Really, and there's a study, I can't remember which site has it, but just it breaks down the percentage of All-Stars, and it pretty obviously, common sense would tell you it. From number 1, gets worse to number 2, to number 3, to number 4. So the draft slots matter all the way from the top of the first round on. Honestly.
Yeah, draft slots matter, and I'm sure many of our listeners are sports fans in general, and you don't just follow the Bucks. But in every sport they matter, but in basketball probably more than any other sport. In the NFL, you will get a Tom Brady in the 7th round every now and then, but you will not get a LeBron James in the 2nd round of the NBA draft. You will not. It's never happened. It never will happen. When you want that legit top 50 of all-time player, they're going to go top 3 in the draft. I don't think I'd have to look at the list of where all the
I don't think there's many Hall of Famers that were in this era second round picks or undrafted guys.
There will be a few guys. Manu Ginobili wasn't he a second round pick? There's going to be a few guys who get into the Hall of Fame here and there that are second round picks, but the vast majority of them, not only are they first round picks, the vast majority of them are going to be top 5, top 10 picks. And I at some point, someone's probably already done the work where there's a breakdown of what it is, but. It passes the eye test. It's a much different game. Baseball, football, hockey, they have longer drafts, more rounds, more players, completely different ballgame. But in basketball, draft pick or draft position is probably the most important thing there. That's what you need.
Well, and as we said, the Bucks are sitting at 10 games under 500, 22-32 at the trade deadline, or before the trade deadline at the All-Star break, which I'll toot my own horn. About 6 weeks ago, I kind of projected. I was looking at their schedule, and that's exactly where I had them, hoping for more losses. But again, I look at we talk about local teams. I wish the Bucks would be more like the Brewers are, and they hired a young GM, and it seems that they've gone all in with this rebuild that the Brewers are doing. And we've heard it in years past under the Cole regime that the Bucks are going to rebuild while staying competitive, and it's proven many, many times that you literally cannot do it. It does not work, particularly in a small market like Milwaukee, because you could probably be competitive and rebuild with, say you're the Lakers, say you're the Knicks, although they haven't been very successful at it, because you have it in your back pocket that if there's a star player that becomes available, it's likely he's going to want to play in a larger market like that. So maybe in those cases, yes, but when you have a place that's not a free agent destination and you don't have a lot of trade chips at any point in time, which the Bucks really haven't had much over the years, you got to go all in and go completely young. And I will say on the other side of the argument for these last 2 wins that we really are cursing right now, it was more so the young guys that are leading us to the wins and not the older veterans. So that is the silver lining of those two.
Yeah, I'm disappointed they got the win, but how they got the win is the least of my concerns. And that's we've said this from the start. Even though we're on the tank, if the young guys go out there and they win the games, that at least shows us something for the future. It's something to be excited about. If we have a game post trade deadline here where Rashad Vaughn goes out and he hits 5 for 7 on 3-pointers and drops 25 points, that'll give us something to really be excited about. If Bayless goes out and does that, I just want to shoot myself in the head because I really don't give a damn. It's not just the results on the court, it's how they get the results on the court. So yes, the silver lining and why I'm not, I'm disappointed they won those last 2 games, but I'm not pissed off and angry because at least it was mostly on the backs of the young guys. I do worry the Monroe to the bench. I feel like that's actually a good move for wins and losses. I feel like he can really abuse some second units in the NBA. You see that the Spurs have done that when they bring Tony Parker off the bench, and you have a legit talent guy coming off the bench, and they just beat the crap out of the second unit. And there's not that many quality starting centers in the NBA, let alone backup centers. So I actually think that's a really good role for Greg Monroe. I just wish it wasn't this year, where I'm afraid that might help us win more.
Well, and who knows? Maybe earlier in the year, if you would have went from the start, maybe that could have made you closer to a playoff team. But the realistic nature, I mean, the bottom line is he wasn't going to sign here to be a 6th man. So while it makes more sense from a basketball standpoint, I don't think this is a long-term thing for him. I don't think he's going to let this continue for much longer.
Right, and who knows what was said between him and the coaching staff and management. It takes a certain type of player who can mentally handle coming off the bench and understand that maybe it's not an insult to not be a starter, but it's best for you and the team. If he's the type that can accept that, I'm still willing to trade him. No questions asked if we get the right bargain back. But if we do keep him and he's that super sub off the bench, I'm okay with him having that role going forward. Let's just see what happens at the trade deadline before we make that decision.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about some rumors and some of the things that we're hearing going into this trade deadline. First off, there was a report, I think, from Gary Wolfel, which, grain of salt, of course, but supposedly Giannis is the only true 100% untouchable guy on the team. Granted, I don't know if untouchable really exists unless you have LeBron or Steph Curry in this league. Even Durant, there's a small possibility he's traded at this deadline with his impending status.
Right,
so.
There's rumors that the Clippers are open to trading Blake Griffin. And to think that someone who's perennial all-star should be traded, it doesn't happen often, but it will. I'm glad to hear that personally, because if I was making a list, he'd certainly be on the list of. No, he's not. He's not going anywhere. The potential is still too high.
Right. So they list him as the only real untouchable in that Jabari Parker and Chris Middleton are pretty much close to untouchable as far as who they're looking to move, but they wouldn't necessarily be against it if you blew them away with some ridiculous over-the-top offer. So that pretty much leaves for the other main pieces on the team, Greg Monroe and Michael Carter-Williams, who I've actually heard quite a few rumors, nothing concrete like a rumor that Monroe to X team for X player, but just the two names that keep coming up the most. To me, Greg Monroe, it would make a lot of sense to trade him now because I don't think from a value and an asset management standpoint his value is going to get any higher than it is right now. Next year, he's essentially expiring with that player option at the end of next year that he can opt out of his contract. So he becomes essentially an expiring contract, which he's still a good player, but you're not going to get as much as you would, I think, at this deadline, knowing that the team that's getting him is going to get at least a season and a half out of him. And Michael Carter-Williams, who, you could argue what the value is there. He's obviously proven to be a tremendous defensive player. And I think a lot of teams down the stretch, particularly Western Conference teams, would love to have that type of player that you can match up against a team like Golden State or San Antonio or Oklahoma City. Or if you're one of those teams, get him so other teams can't get him to match up defensively with some of the more dynamic offensive teams. But those are the two names, and I think that I'd be okay with either one of those guys going, barring that it's not a win-now move to try to sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think if you're trading one of them, I don't see any way it is a win-now move just because they have the value they have for us. It's hard to imagine a piece coming back that was win-now for them. But that would be the worst-case scenario. If I was personally making a list of the roster, it would be very similar. The rest of the guys, Mayo and Bayless, we've talked about before, they're obviously expiring contracts who could probably net you something, whether that's a second-round pick or the rights to a Euro guy or D-League guy. I don't know. Someone like Rashad Vaughn. I don't want to trade Rashad Vaughn, but at the same time, he's just not. His value's not there. There's no one's really seen enough of him that I can't imagine someone would be interested in him. So I almost think it doesn't need to be said that he's not tradable, just because what's his value really at? But yeah, so Middleton to me. His contract, with the way the salary cap's going to be going, he's going to be a pretty bargain player here in another year or two when the salary cap starts really skyrocketing.
Well, he needs to get some consistency down because he is either red hot, looking like a first-team All-NBA guy, or looking like a fringe rotation player. There's no in-between with him this year, and that's been very frustrating to say the least.
Yes, it is. There are times where he's ridiculously on fire. You're right about that, and he just won't miss not a single shot, literally, but
he goes 100% from the field.
Yeah, he goes 100% for 3 straight weeks, and then he shoots about 15% for the 3 weeks after that.
He's hitting half-court shots.
But, he's not as maddeningly inconsistent as a guy like Ersan Ilyasova was.
Who?
Yeah. He was crazy inconsistent and drove me nuts all the time because you'd see him go through these stretches where he'd be on fire and say, he's finally turned the corner, and then he goes back to garbage. So Middleton's at least a little more consistent than that, but it would be nice to see him, every NBA player has a game here or there where they miss their shots, whatever it is, they're under the weather, dog is sick, kid's sick, whatever the case may be, they have a game where they just aren't hitting their shots. But you'd like to see those be minimized and be few and far between. They're a little too often with Chris right now.
And back to Monroe, there's a lot of big names that have been rumored to be on the move. Some of the ones that come to mind, I've heard that Houston's looking to move Dwight Howard, that he's just not fitting there. Cleveland potentially looking to move Kevin Love for some pieces that fit better around LeBron and Kyrie and company. Then you have a team like Boston who has a huge expiring contract in David Lee and a ton of draft picks, including Brooklyn's unprotected first-round pick this year, which as of now they're slotted, I believe, as the 5th worst team in the NBA. So that's going to be a very, very high pick. And they also have their own first-round pick, Dallas's first-round pick, future first-round picks. So they're a team that's probably going to be active at this deadline, being that they're in the playoff hunt, and that the East is kind of down this year. So I'm not necessarily advocating the Bucks getting involved in a trade with one of these, or to acquire one of these big-name veterans. But when you have a guy like Monroe who has that higher salary that could match up in trades, and also is a double-double machine, he's pretty much putting up around 15 and 10 every game this year. So a team that's still trying to make the playoffs or make some sort of run could see those numbers and think, okay, let's move this guy. We can go to Monroe, get that steady presence in the middle offensively. I'd love to see the Bucks get involved with some sort of trade involving draft picks, expiring contracts, or young players. As long as we're not the team that's that foolishly trying to acquire Dwight Howard, I'm cool with it. But it does kind of scare me knowing that Kidd is running the show here, and these last 2 wins, and I'm having nightmares. Chuck, you gotta help me. You gotta come over and hold me when I'm having nightmares.
It's almost irrational after what happened at the trade deadline that we have this fear, but I think it is. We're all.
Well, is it though? Because we talked about it the last podcast that the MCW move, we thought that maybe they would sit on Brandon Knight, but then they trade him. But they could have made a real win in the future type move in acquiring that Lakers pick, and instead they get Carter Williams. So, I think there's still some legit concerns that it wasn't about we're not committing to Brandon Knight, but we want to build for the future. It's that, well, maybe this guy will be better for us. So it really was kind of a win-now move.
That is true. That is looking at it from the other side. They just don't have enough history to say one way or another what direction they're going to go. But as Bucks fans for the better part of 3 decades, roughly we're all right around that 30-year-old range. And I know some of our listeners will be older, some will be probably a little younger. But for the entirety of the Herb Cole regime, we were basically abused, and we just have come to expect it. And yeah, it is in the back of my head, and it is a fear looming over me, like a dark cloud that the next 5 days could be amazing, or they could be terrible.
Or they could be just kind of blah.
Yeah, they could be blah. Maybe we do nothing, which would be disappointing. Depending, and there's all this talk about these big players being moved. You talked about that, and certainly if these names start moving, we need to be on the phone with all these teams, seeing how we can be involved. What can we do to help you facilitate your trade? And all we want back is more draft picks, more young assets, preferably draft picks. If we can get all the draft picks, that'd be great. That Brooklyn pick that you got, they're currently tied for 4th worst record with Phoenix. They're both 14 and 40, with Lakers and 76ers having the worst record.
Well, and let's be serious here. That's a legitimate shot to get a Ben Simmons or a Brandon Ingram in the draft. The Celtics are likely to not move that pick. Unless there was a rumor involving DeMarcus Cousins, maybe I could see if they're acquiring Cousins and giving up that pick, I could see him parting ways with it. But again, for all intents and purposes for what the Bucks are having to offer, they're not going to give that up for Greg Monroe, and I don't even think they give it up for a guy like Jabari Parker. Because Ben Simmons and Brandon Ingram, to me, just look like better prospects. So you still have a good.
And they don't have the injury hanging over their head too. They not to say that they can't get injured down the road, but Jabari's already had the serious injury. So
damaged goods.
If it's on the table, I'm certainly talking to them to see what it takes, because Brooklyn. They're 14 and 40. Lakers have 11 wins. Philadelphia has 8, and then in 5th is Minnesota at 17 wins. So, it's very likely that they end up right there in that 3rd or 4th, and that getting 2nd or even 1st is not out of the question. At this point in the season, it's likely that Brooklyn pick is 3rd or 4th best odds, and that is, like you said, a legit chance at that top or number 2 pick. So, yeah, certainly if that is available, there's, they can have their pick. Not Giannis, but probably, whatever it takes to get it done. I'd be very open to talking to them, because, That's what we want. We want more assets. And we want, if we get that pick and then we do it in some sort of sell now move where Greg Monroe's gone and we lose more games and we end up with our own, top 5 odds and then we have 2 picks in the top 5 odds, that is phenomenal. And that's the type of trade deadline we want to see as hardcore fans. It's not for this season. We're not going anywhere this season. The Basketball Reference playoff projections have us at a 0.3% chance to make the playoffs. It is slim to unlikely. And even if we do, that will be as the 8th seed, at which point we're looking at a 4-game sweep at Cleveland. Maybe we win 1 game. Maybe it's 4-1. But, there's nothing to like about that potential outcome, whereas getting the 5th overall worst record plus getting something else at the trade deadline, some other pick, even if it's not the Brooklyn pick through Boston, we get something that's 7th or 8th, first round pick. Fine, 10th, 12th, 15th, I don't care where it is, just something to make it exciting. And then roll out the young guys. We've got to, we talked about it last time, but we've got to get rid of Bayless and Mayo. They've got to go. They're veterans. They're hogging minutes that need to go to Vaughn. They have potentially some value to some playoff team that wants that guy off the bench. Monroe and Michael Carter-Williams, if the value's there. I'm not just going to sell off, and I don't think Jake would either. You can't just sell off to sell off. That's not what we're advocating here. We want to get value back, particularly these teams that are battling for those. The teams that are battling for the top playoff spots, they don't value their draft picks as much. They want something to help them this year. And we've got to take advantage of that, give them a Greg Monroe and get back something that we would consider better value in the future. We should be the winners on these trades.
Well, and some of the ideas that I've seen, or players that I think we should specifically be targeting if they're available, number one, the situation in Los Angeles with the Lakers and D'Angelo Russell and Byron Scott is just, it's mind-boggling to me. You draft this kid number 2 overall, and the coach doesn't like him. The coach is so quick to criticize him. There's rumors that they'd be open to moving him halfway into his rookie season. To be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of his coming out, but if a guy like that is truly available with the upside, I'd love to see the Bucks try to maybe get in there and steal him. And the other idea, I thought, if you are looking at that pick, maybe you want that Brooklyn pick from Boston. Say they make a trade with Sacramento. There's reports that, their owner's crazy. They still want to win this year, so maybe you can get involved. And if they don't want that pick back for DeMarcus Cousins and they want win-now players, maybe they would think Craig Monroe is the guy, and you throw in a couple other guys. Who knows? But like you said, we want to see clear-cut moves for the future, draft picks, young guys, clearing salary type of things.
These types of trades, we are the losers this year, but next year, 2 years from now, we should be the winners of these trades. You look at other trades in the past, and I'm trying to think of a good example in basketball. The Brandon Jennings trade. We trade him to Detroit. The main pieces we get back are Brandon Knight, which in most people's minds was probably kind of a wash, whatever the case may be, and then Chris Middleton is kind of a throw-in. And if you looked at the time, we were all happy. I was happy to move on from Brandon Jennings. I was done with that. I kind of felt indifferent about Brandon. Kind of how I felt about Michael Carter-Williams when we got him. I'll see how he fits, but didn't really excite me. But 3 years after the trade, we're the clear-cut winners in that trade. We've got Chris Middleton, who's a better player than Brandon Jennings or Brandon Knight. So that's what I want to see. I want to see trades that, I don't care how we look this year on the trade, how are we going to look 2-3 years down the road? Not Tobias Harris, where we look terrible this year and down the road.
Well, and most of the rumors that we've heard so far have been just kind of general rumors about a team being interested or a player maybe being on the move. But there is one name, and I hope you guys are ready to get excited here about who we've been concrete linked to. So Brian Windhorst, who is pretty much LeBron's boy in his back pocket, and whatever LeBron wants to get out there, he goes through Brian Windhorst. But he has reported that the Bucks have had a lot of interest, ready, in Cleveland point guard, not Kyrie Irving, Matthew Dellavedova, the stud Australian St. Mary's, is where he played his college ball, but 25-year-old point guard, good shooter, pretty pesky on defense. He's a good player, but if this is truly the case, this is what really gives me a sick feeling in my stomach that really is a win-now move. I think he's a better player than Michael Carter-Williams as a whole. He's not as good defensively, but he's a much better offensive player, and I think would be a much better fit in the Bucks starting five. But again, what do I care about wins this year? He's a restricted free agent going into next year, so he's making peanuts now, and next year he would have to. You'd be paying him a huge salary increase. So again, if you're going to be giving up assets to get a player like this, then have to pay him all this money to not really do anything for you this year. And I mean, he's a good player, but I wouldn't call him a needle mover by any means for the years to come. Again, it leaves me with this feeling that the ownership and the front office just don't have the right mindset at this point.
Right. I'm interested in him in terms of, how would he fit on the team? Do they plan on him being the starter over Michael Carter-Williams? Is that the idea? Do they think he's the long-term goal? And I'm open to listening to that suggestions, and depending on what we're giving up for it, it's not something it's not a trade I would hate. Like you said, he's a good shooter, pesky on defense. There's nothing I really dislike about him as a player. It's not like Grievous Vasquez, who I just don't like as a player.
Or a human being.
Yeah. So...
Or for haircut purposes, just total chotch.
So I can get behind the idea of bringing him in, but like you said, this helps us on the court this year, which is bad, unless someone has a phantom injury. He comes over in a trade, he passes his physical, but then all of a sudden he's got a sore hamstring or something. Well, whoops. Should have given him a better physical. In quotes, air quotes there on that physical.
Chuck Chilling will personally give you a physical.
Yeah.
I seen it.
Yeah, So, that's the only concrete name we've been linked to so far. It's obviously early. We've got the All-Star game this Sunday evening. There's usually a lot of talks. You get, executives are at the All-Star game. Everyone's there, kind of a big party, and people are talking. And we'll see what happens. Monday they're back to work, and usually in those 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then obviously Thursday morning, that's when you start hearing more chatter right after the All-Star game rather than at this point. So I feel like we're in the calm before the storm. Every year under John Hammond, we have made, we seem to make some sort of trade at the trade deadline. They've mixed results on them. Don't like to bring up Tobias Harris, but that's obviously on the negative side of things. Hopefully we're having an equally, as bad as that trade was, hopefully we're having a good one this year. But it'll be interesting to see where we go in the next 5 days. I'm nervous. I'm excited. There's a lot of emotions going through me, and I'm sure you probably have a lot of emotions as well. I've got to poop. Not really, but just kind of the gambit of emotions.
Well, and if there's anybody within the Bucks that has any access to this podcast, or anybody out there that has any access to anybody within the Bucks organization, for the love of God, don't repeat your previous mistakes. The kind of move that I'm worried that we're going to see is, take a guy like Rashad Vaughn, youngest player in the NBA, just as Tobias Harris was when he was on the Bucks, and never got opportunities. And Vaughn's opportunities this year have been few and far between, although it's been a little bit more lately. But I could see, okay, we really like Dellavedova. Rashad Vaughn, okay, he was a mid-first round pick. Well, that's not a big asset. And then, maybe he blows up just the way Tobias Harris did. Bucks, don't do something stupid like that. Be patient with the true young guys. I mean, I'm fine with the Monroe trade, as I said. Some people want to say he's part of the young core, 25, whatever. He's a 6-year veteran. I don't really consider him part of the true young core. But we don't really know what we have with Rashad Vaughn. We know what we have with Monroe, and to a little lesser extent, Michael Carter-Williams. So those guys, that's fine. But just don't do anything stupid. That would be the type of move, and then you would see Dellavedova leave for nothing, like JJ Redick did. Oh, I'm sorry. We got like 2 or 3 first-round pick or second-round picks for JJ Redick. So sorry, I was wrong there.
Right, and I'm okay with trading Greg Monroe. If we don't, I think my biggest hope, if we don't trade Greg Monroe, is that he would come down with some sort of lower back stiffness or, tight hamstring that just held him out of, 20 games. And let the young guys play and let the product on the court suffer a little bit, because he puts up numbers. He's putting up 17 points, 10 boards a game. That's nothing to say is no impact. He has an impact on the game, and that's why he probably has the value he has, and hopefully we can get something back. But on the off chance that we don't, the right value isn't there, whatever the case may be, I'm really hoping there's some mysterious injury bugs going through the locker room. And when I say injuries, for those not picking up on it, I don't mean legit injuries. I mean the
Chuck
Bucks
wants
say
everybody
they have
to tear their
injuries.
ACL and break their necks. And
He's
a masochist.
I mean, the Bucks say they have injuries, but really they're just giving the guys a early start to the off season where they just kind of get to work out, hit the gym, whatever, and a little more time in the strip club for Greg Monroe rather than worrying too much about the on-court production. So, my biggest fear going forward is the same fear I've had for the last 25 games. It's that we continue to mire in mediocrity here. We continue to win at about a 500 pace.
Yep.
Because,
as you said, we're 2-3 since the last podcast.
Yeah, since the last podcast, there were 5 games. We lost all 3 on the West Coast. It looked great. We were coming into the trade deadline on a 5-game losing streak, and then we pulled 2 wins out of our ass. So, it's another week, another 2 weeks of playing 500 ball. We're now 10 games under 500, I believe.
Yep, 22-32.
So, like we talked in the last episode, we kind of hit this rock bottom point when we were 10-18, and here we are, all those games later, 22-32. So, in that time period, we've gone 12-22. That's just not 12-20. We were 10-18, 12-14. There we go.
There you go with the math again. You need your fingers back. You need more fingers.
The irony is I'm actually pretty good at math. 12-14 over our last 26 games. That's just not going to cut it. That is the absolute worst place to be in the NBA. And we've been preaching it all season long, and I know it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but it's just disappointing as a Bucks fan.
Where I come from, beating a dead horse means something else.
Yeah, well, we don't all have the dirty mind.
Sorry, I'm in a frisky mood today.
Yeah.
The last
Bad news for your wife.
She has no idea. But the last point about Monroe, and it's an argument that I've heard from a lot of people, that, if we trade him now after just signing him in the offseason, and he's the biggest free agent signing in Bucks history, which is true, what does that say about us as a franchise and that we would just jettison the biggest name that we've ever gotten to sign here? Well, to me, this is still a business, and it's a business move to trade him. When you signed him, you thought you were going to be potentially anywhere from maybe 3, in the East. I mean, you thought you had a really great team. And everything's changed since then. The business model has changed, so appropriate changes need to be made. Not to mention, when Monroe signed here, he said the biggest thing that swayed him was that he wanted to play for a playoff team. And he really, really thought the Bucks were going to be a playoff team. And turns out it's highly, highly unlikely that that's not going to happen. So what's really worse for him? Getting traded even though he just signed here, but he wanted to be on a playoff team, or going to an actual contender and contributing to a playoff run? What do you think his opinion is going to be of us? I mean, is it going to be better if he stays here and plays on a mediocre team that misses out, or he goes and potentially wins a ring somewhere? I think we're doing him a service by trading him, and it's a very easy PR fix to, right after the trade goes down, you just say, we talked to Greg, he was on board, he wanted to be on a playoff team this year. Unfortunately, it didn't work out here, so we were able to find a partner that is going to work out better for him and us. Simple PR bullshit press conference. I mean, it
happens all the time. You see it all the time with your veterans, especially when they're winding down towards the end of their career and your team's not as good as it once was, and you say, we sent them off to a team that could win. And you see it in baseball, very common in baseball at the trade deadline. You send your pitchers and who your hitters and whatever, and they go help a playoff team. In basketball, not quite as common, but that's exactly what we're talking about with Mayo, with Bayless, and potentially Greg Monroe. It doesn't even necessarily have to be total lip service to say that sort of thing. It could be, it's probably half truths at best, but yeah, that's so yeah, it's definitely something that you can do there, and you can play it off the right way. And it probably could be a better fit for everyone involved, Monroe, the team, whatever. There's no shame in, I think it's worse to stay the course if something's not working than it is to admit it's not the right fit and just move on and go in a different direction. The worst thing we could do is just stay the course for the sake of staying the course. And so yeah, I sound like I'm rambling on here just because there's so much fear in the back of my head of what's going to happen in the next 5 days. And yeah, so okay, Jake's pointing at something here. I know what he wants. Okay, you take the mic for
now. Well, no, we're going to change gears now because we did cover quite a bit about this trade deadline, and I think anybody that's listened to this show any time recently knows where everybody stands. But we also have talked a lot on this show about the Milwaukee Bucks fan section, the Cream City Clash, aka the Creams. They're Squad 6. That's what they've always, or that's what they were originally known as, and that's how we know them. But we've talked before about the ridiculousness of the misguided reverence of Zaza Pachulia and the people in the Bucks and Zaza himself getting pissed that they chanted "Sit down, Zaza" at him, which it was just utter foolishness. But if you're on the squad's mailing list, which maybe one of us here is. Maybe we just got this forwarded to us. Who knows?
From an anonymous source.
Yeah, who knows how we got this?
We have our sources.
But this is just going to be quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. But I thought this was just a hilarious commentary on where the squad is right now as a point. So, Chuck, why don't you go ahead and read off what we've got here?
So I'm just going to summarize this. But this went out to everyone who's on the squad's email, which is a lot of people. Over 430 people right in the email. So they said, we're reaching the All-Star break, which some people treat like the halfway point. We're actually about, 60% through the season. We're more than halfway through. But so they first starts off with a little praise, very standard management tactic there. The good, 15-8 home record. The squad is definitely having an impact. Every team most teams have a better home record than they do a road record. So that's, you can argue how much impact they have. I will say that I definitely hear them on the TV. Part of that is because the crowds at the Bradley Center are so pathetically small that they're the only fans making any noise. But yes, you can definitely hear them on the TV, which means you can hear them on the court. So certainly I feel they have some impact on the games. So that's the good thing. And then, we have big thanks to the team getting over 430 people. They've had most games. They have quite a large crowd. And I will say the handful of games I've gone to this year, I have been impressed that they have 80 butts in the seats for that. In past years, it has been somewhat hard to get full there. So that is one thing they've done better this year than in past years, in my mind, is actually getting people to the games. Then the email goes on to things we can work on.
Serious business now, this fan
Just
squad.
Like there are 2 positives, there were 2 negatives. A few incidents this season. The first one obviously being Zaza, which they expand on, saying that he was a valued member of the organization, both on and off the court, and he was very upset, along with several of our executives and general managers.
So
now,
sad.
We had an episode that we talked about this for about half the time. You can argue how much he helped on and off the court. Zaza, as a player, is kind of a bit of a punk and a dirty player. And there's some value in that. I don't even mean that as a negative connotation to me. You need some guys who are... Dellavedova is actually a little bit that way, too. They get under your skin. They know how to push your buttons and kind of come off as a punk and irritate you. You love those guys when they're on your team, and you hate them when they're on the other team. Zaza's got a little bit of that in him. And for him to be upset that they chanted "Sit down, Zaza" and all this, get the sand out of your vagina. Be a man. This is the NBA. Get over it. The second complaint, apparently, and I wasn't at the game, but apparently at the Wizards game, there were 10 to 15 people from the squad during halftime marching around in the concourse, and apparently even had a sign saying, "We hate Gary," referring to Gary Neal.
Hold on. Before you go on, who says anything about Gary Neal? I didn't even realize he was still in the league.
Yeah, I had to look up because he was not even at the game. He didn't make the trip. He was injured, so he wasn't even in Milwaukee.
So those 10 to 15 people, for the guy to not be here, they really do hate Gary Neal to go to that trouble.
And to me, is that crossing a line? Yeah, probably. I like when I was in the squad, and that was the first 2 years Jake and I were both over there. The best chants were always the creative ones. Something like "We hate you," that's a dumb chant. There's no creativity behind it. If you're going to chant something like "Average Johnson" for a Joe Johnson, that's creative.
And accurate from what I hear.
And apparently Jake has firsthand confirmation that it's also accurate. That and we went up to a preseason game the second year, and it was who was it? Miles
on the Bobcats.
Darius Miles on the Bobcats, and he shouted out at him when he's doing a free throw, "You were great in NBA Jam," and he kind of chuckled and looked up at us. Those are the kind of things that are creative. Running around chanting "We hate Gary," that's dumb. Whoever did that, if any of you are listening, that's just dumb. It's uninspired. It's nothing. And on top of that, did it probably cross a line? Sure, but did it need an entire email calling these people out? They're just dumb. I don't really have much to say on that. When I first saw the email, I thought it might have been Gary Wolfel, and because Gary Neal didn't play, so I didn't see him in the box score. So I was really confused.
Wouldn't that be something? Huh?
I was really confused about what the chant was even referring to. Plus, Gary Neal was Captain Tank Commander. Who doesn't love Gary Neal? Who doesn't love Gary Neal for what he contributed in getting us the number 2 overall pick?
I love the Neal. They should have played him more. Maybe. Well, we couldn't have been any better.
We had the worst record.
He did his job.
He did his job, and as a player, did he contribute anything to the team of value? No, but there's. It's not like he's a hateable guy to me. He's just another guy in the NBA. I don't get what the point of that chant was. But at the same time, this email came off as very pedantic to me. It's just nitpicking, and why? Well, there's still to be the Zaza Pachulia thing happened on January 8th. So this email is over a month after that. For them to bring that up again, they're still butthurt over people making a little fun of Zaza Pachulia. That to me just shows some really thin skin by Zaza, by whoever was involved in saying that this needed to be said.
Well, and this may be the last time we bring up the squad on this show because it's kind of pathetic at this point. I don't know. Maybe it's just time to disband the squad. If they're really going to be the fun police to this nature or to this level, what? I can't imagine being involved in that anymore. Because my God, it's a joke just hearing about stuff like this. You're going to have this section. Let them. The original vision was Bogut wanted to have soccer hooligans style fans. So you're going to get to this point where you're going to police people that much, just disband it, let the BC be as quiet as it usually is anyways. Who cares anymore?
Right, and to a certain extent...
But keep giving Grand Admiral Dan free tickets to every game.
Yeah,
he deserves it.
I get to a certain extent you have to follow a certain code of conduct. You can't let them get away with things that other fans are not allowed to get away with. You can't have them swearing and things like that. It's still a family environment. So there needs to be some ground rules. But to say that you can't tease the other team a little bit, that to me is where it crosses the line. Because the chant was "Sit down, Zaza." It's not, "Zaza, you're a bitch," or "Zaza, get the sand out of your vagina," which is what I would chant now, in hindsight, after all this has gone down. But
Zaza,
they were not.
Your head is fucking massive.
Yeah,
giant
they weren't swearing. They weren't really being even personal. It's not a personal attack. There's certain things
Zaza, you sound like Andre the Giant when you talk.
Yeah, I've played basketball with friends.
Zaza,
much more younger.
Gotten a chick. I don't know.
Yeah, you don't make fun of someone else's family. You leave their family out of it, their kids, their wife, all that. None of those lines to me were crossed. This wasn't even all that heavy trash talk. Zaza probably gets more trash talk from the other players every single day in about 5 minutes of a game than he got there.
He probably gets more.
He probably gets more in practice from his teammates. So to make this big a deal out of it, both back on January 9th, the day after this event happened, and then now again a month later, to me says that someone has some thin skin up there, and, they just want the fan squad to be a mouthpiece for the front office and do what they say, which is not the point of what it was started. Like you said, it's supposed to be like soccer hooligans or a college fan section, which, you go look at some of the videos that, I think it's Stanford with the curtain of surprise, or maybe Arizona State. Well, they open up the curtain and there's all sorts of crazy shit in there that, does it cross the line sometimes? Sure, but it's funny, and it's fun for the fans. And this is
God forbid you had fun at an NBA game.
Yeah, I mean, to me, they just want the squad to be a mouthpiece for the organization, put out whatever propaganda they want them to put out, and no creativity, no outside the box. And to me, that's a shame, because the first year particularly, it was a lot of fun. And did we cross the line now and then? Sure. But for the most part, we were given free rein, and
no such place.
And we didn't swear. We kept it. The most controversial thing we did was the Average Johnson chant, which got shut down by one Zach Grimm pretty quickly. But other than that, it was just give them free rein and let them do their thing, and don't worry about what the other teams think. The other teams, that's not your problem.
We're
the Bucks.
I had some pretty cool foam fingers that my wife got for me as part of my birthday present, which I don't know if you're familiar with the shocker hand motion.
You can Google it.
Yeah, Google Urban Dictionary, the shocker. And my wife was nice enough to get me 2 foam fingers that were green and red to match the Bucks colors that were in the shape of the shocker. And I think I only got 1 or 2 games out of those foam fingers before those got shut down. Because I remember I had them, and like every time they would show Squad 6 on the Jumbotron, I was always kind of like thrusting them, towards the Jumbotron. And Zach Grimm, who ran the section, got a phone call from the Bucks director of game ops that said, okay, he can have the fingers, but no more of the thrusting. And then, like 2 minutes later, he got another phone call and just said, no, we can't do the shocker fingers. But they did get some more mileage. I got a picture of Andrew Bogut at our little end of the season party holding the shocker with me. So that was definitely a gift.
Bogut had a good sense of humor about all this stuff. Bogut's always, the handful of times I've met him, seemed like a pretty down-to-earth, cool guy.
We miss you, Bogues.
Yeah.
See, that's a guy who maybe should get a little reverence. Not Zaza.
To me, I would. If I was in the squad, I would certainly heckle him a little bit, but I would not go after Bogut hard because of everything he meant, not only to the Bucks as a team, but to the squad
itself. Yes.
But Zaza is owed nothing. Literally, he's owed nothing.
Yeah, fuck that guy. He looks like he's in the 10th round of a heavyweight fucking title fight.
He was here early in his career. He was here later in his career. Yeah, he provided some on-court production and whatever else, but he is literally owed nothing. He's not some saint that was going around and helping every children's charity in Wisconsin. I'm sure he did his charity work, but he is literally owed nothing by this organization. He's not that type of player.
Poop Chulia. See, I just did your work for you, squad.
There you go.
Well, we talked about him. We talked about Bogut. Let's talk about another former Bucks center, Larry Sanders, this week. There was an article that came out that basically said Larry is exploring the possibility of an NBA comeback after missing the entire last calendar year or so with the issues that were well documented here in Milwaukee. My question to me would be, let's say he really has kicked the weed, which I really could give a shit whether he did or not, but he's in a better place, mentally. Would you be the type that would welcome him back? And I know that it's very, 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 very unlikely to happen, given that Jason Kidd is still around, but say there was some sort of line of communication between him and the Bucks, I really, really think that I'd be open to it. And I know not a lot of people will agree with me. A lot of people have just tons and tons of vitriol for the man, for everything that happened and the way that it happened. But I've always kind of had a soft spot for the guy, mainly, for a few reasons. Number one, when you have the possibility of mental issues leading to his, little outbursts that he's had, and just the struggle that he had with being a famous person and being a rich person. I don't know how deep that goes. That could have really seriously harmed the guy mentally. And, people have such negative things to say about the guy, but you need to remember that these pro athletes, and I guess it kind of contradicts what we were just talking about with the squad, but again, as long as you're not going over the line, that's fine. But these guys are people, and they're not characters on a TV show that you watch that you can, I watched The Walking Dead, and I cheered when the main character's wife died on the show. Okay, well, that's a character. If the actress really died, I'm not cheering. So, but we need to remember that everybody's different. He went through the things that he went through, and I always liked him because he seemed down to earth, and he was just a different kind of guy. And on the court, he provided a lot of things that you're not going to get from an everyday NBA player. I mean, just the athletic ability that he possessed for a guy that size. He worked his ass off to become an elite shot blocker. I believe he went to what they said was like a shot blocking school to improve your technique, to improve your footwork, to improve your timing. He's exactly what the Bucks need from a roster perspective as well. And I guess I'm a sucker for redemption stories too. I mean, what better way to redeem yourself than if you had all these issues with the Bucks, the buyout, you had to walk away. If you were to come and make good on another contract here, that would be a great PR story at least, and something that you would only see in a movie or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm a forgive and forget, move on type of guy. I always liked Larry as a player. He's defensively, I wish he had better hands at times. He had a tendency of passing the ball down in the post and the ball bounced right off his hands out of bounds. And as someone who played basketball growing up on the playgrounds and whatever, I can't fathom having hands that bad. But it is what it is. From a defensive standpoint, he was elite rim protector. And I would certainly welcome the on-court production back. Unfortunately, the way I see it, that bridge was burned, and then Larry pissed all over the ashes, and I just don't see
Shooter McGavin style.
Yeah, I don't see any chance that it happens. If it did, personally, I would have no problem with that. I am sympathetic to the idea that he has whatever mental issues he has. I'm fortunate enough that I don't suffer from anything like that, but I do know, I have met people or had family members who have bouts of depression and whatever the issues are. And I am sympathetic to that cause and grateful that I don't have to deal with that. So, for me, from that standpoint, I feel like things potentially could have been handled better. When we had the buyout, there was the talk that maybe somewhere down the road he's going to want to play again. And if that's the case, you kind of hope that they could have worked with him while he seeked whatever it was he needed, some sort of, obviously he needed a break away from the game. And maybe he's not going to come back. I don't know. This is obviously at this point just a rumor. As far as we know, no one has specifically contacted him, and he hasn't contacted anyone at this point. I'm just treating it as a complete rumor. Whatever happens, I wish the best for him as a person, because, like you said, these athletes are people. I've had the fortune of meeting some of them over the years at various Bucks events, whether it was a Squad 6 party or at Pick and Save or just out. There was one time I was out and run into Ursan or whatever. You just run into these people because, in the end of the day, a lot of them do live in your community, and they are just people who are physically in the top 1% in the world, and that lets them play a sport that we love. So, from a personal standpoint, I hope for the best for Larry. From an on-court standpoint, I would love to have someone with his skill set on the court. I don't see it being Larry Sanders just because I really think that bridge is burned.
You're right. The realistic side kicks in at that point.
I mean, if he did, obviously you'd be coming in with a contract with very little guaranteed money. That way, if something happens, he's just gone, and the guaranteed money is minimal. Lots of incentives, whatever it needs to be, and you would think that that Larry he'd have to be understanding that, because even if it's not the Bucks, if some other team is interested in signing him, anyone's going to lay very minimal on the guaranteed money, I'd have to imagine. So.
Well, I don't think anything would happen this season. I mean, obviously he would need an NBA training camp to get into basketball shape, even if he is working out at home or whatever is going on. So it would be something that you would see probably next season, and getting an NBA veteran minimum type deal. My idea would be, as you said, give him the very, very little guaranteed money to where, and as confirmed by our friend Grand Admiral Dan Helsel, you could structure a contract that says basically you can waive them at any point during the duration of the contract. I mean, if you specifically write it that way, where you wouldn't face any penalty, and that you're off the hook basically.
Per the Grand Admiral, you can have anywhere from 0 to 100% of the contract guaranteed. So you just write a contract with 10%, whatever it takes. He's going to want some guaranteed money. I don't see him playing for zero guaranteed money, or maybe you can. Maybe he's really contrite. He really wants to show the Bucks that, hey, I want to come back. I want to do the right thing. And I don't know. Maybe that's what he wants.
Well, that would be half the battle for me as far as taking him back. If he were to come to you and say, look, I want to make this right, I mean, that would kind of show you maybe as a person he's changed a little bit. Instead of going and say, okay, I'm going to go sign with Golden State. I'm going to go sign with some contending team to go win a championship. And knowing the little that I know about Larry, it's possible that he has that kind of a personality, and that maybe this. And I've seen tweets from him where he talks about missing his teammates and stuff. Maybe he really does miss not just NBA basketball and the luxuries that come with playing NBA basketball, but also the people that he was close with when he was here, whether it be teammates, management, whatever, just the city in general. There was a huge article about Larry after he got paid where he had nothing but praise for the city of Milwaukee, and he talked about how much he loved the small-town feel of it. And again, this is all speculation, but if he had any interest, I'd at the very least explore that possibility, because again, besides the perfect fit of what they need, or it appears of what the Bucks need at center, I'm a sucker for redemption stories, and I would love to see some sort of happy resolution or ending for both the Bucks and Larry.
Yeah, there's two types of stories I like. This goes sports, movies, whatever. Redemption stories are great.
And porn.
Origin stories. I love origin stories.
What about origin porn?
Sure. Orgy porn?
Yeah,
sure. Sure. Sometimes you got to be in the right mood for that sort of thing. So, if he was willing to, and you're right, that if he came to the Bucks and he said, look,
I want to make a porn.
Veteran minimum, nothing guaranteed. I want to make this right by you guys. That whatever. He can make this right by the team. And at least if I was, I'm a pretty forgiving guy. I'd strongly consider it.
And
I don't know what sort of grudges there are between him and Jason Kidd and John Hammond and the owners, because they were the ones who had to negotiate the buyout and
which was very, very small compared to what he could have gotten.
So, and I don't know how those negotiations went. I don't know if it was, and maybe when the negotiations went, maybe it wasn't all that, maybe it wasn't like a bitter divorce. Maybe it was just, hey, I need a change in my life. This isn't working out.
Well, and we don't know.
I could get this much money, and they settled at a lower amount, and he just walked away amicably.
We don't even know. He could have maybe just wanted to completely walk away, and he could have been crazy pressured by the players' union that you have to. You can't walk away from all that money. You have to get something. So again, we don't know the full story there. To further extrapolate on my idea, I wanted to write up a contract where it's whatever we've paid him in the buyout, that's subtracted in whatever he had earned previously. But whatever is left over from what we were originally going to pay him, minus the buyout and what he's earned, you have it basically where the Bucks have no risk. We'll say, we will pay you what we're going to pay you. We can finish out this contract like we're going to. With no guaranteed money. Yeah. So if you fuck up, we can waive you, and that's it. And I don't know, maybe he would be open to that, because that's probably a lot more money than he could potentially earn from another team, or that they would even be willing to risk, guaranteed or not, on him. And then again, there's no risk there for the Bucks. To me, that's zero risk and potentially tons of reward, because if you give Larry the money that he originally got, if that works out for you, that is a bargain basement contract for what these contracts are going to look like in the NBA going forward. It shows faith on our end, it shows faith on his end, and we can have a happy family again.
You're right that if both sides could come to an agreement on something like that, whether it's the amount of money that would have been on his existing contract, a lesser amount, because let's be honest, when you walk away, you hurt your value a little bit. So it might not take the full amount. It could potentially build trust, be a great redemption story, and if he returns to a player, then you've got that trust, and maybe he has a piece going forward. if he's serious about this and he comes and we've heard this rumor, maybe he's already talked to the Bucks. We don't know. It would certainly make trading Greg Monroe make much more sense if Larry Sanders was in play.
Now, granted, I wouldn't trade Greg Monroe with the assumption that, we got Larry back, nothing like that. But down the line, that could make it a lot easier to swallow if you were to trade him Monroe.
Right. Well, and you still, you trade Monroe, you still have Henson. You sunk a lot of money into him. It's
same contract that they gave Larry, they gave to Henson.
It's really disappointing to me how that contract we gave to Henson for him to play how much he's played this year. It's a waste of money, and I don't have much to say about that other than that. So, if we had a Larry Sanders and a John Henson over what we have now, and we got some asset back for Greg Monroe, that could drastically and quickly reshape the future of this team. So that's where we stand on Larry Sanders. It's rumors at this point in time, and we'll see what happens.
Well, and keep in mind, he also allegedly punched Mike Dunleavy Jr. in the face.
Well, that's a plus.
If there's a reason to sign a guy, there you go.
I mean, if
him and Giannis could have a field day with that little idiot.
If anyone deserves to be punched, it's Mike Dunleavy Jr. I mean, it's amazing to me I said this last year in the playoffs, the Clippers, like every person on the Clippers team, I just love to punch him. And Mike Dunleavy was on the Bulls. Like, if you put Mike Dunleavy on the Clippers, like you have Blake Griffin, you have Matt Barnes, you have Chris Paul, you have Mike
gone
Dunleavy.
Now, but
but he was there last year.
Yeah.
Last year,
DeAndre Jordan,
like that entire team. I just like
the coach's son plays for the team. Like, man, this is like a '80s movie, like stereotypical hated team. So
there's certain guys, and I don't know what it is. When I just like Matt Barnes, I just look at him like I could punch him, and I wouldn't even feel bad about it. And maybe he's a nice guy. I've never met him.
I don't
really
think he's a nice guy.
Really not trash talking him in that aspect because I don't know him personally.
Have you heard the Matt Barnes story with Derek Fisher?
A little bit of it, yes. I agree. He's probably not a nice guy. But I'm just saying I don't like to trash talk people I've not personally met.
I do.
Yeah. So that's where we stand. Larry Sanders did punch Mike Dunleavy Jr. That's a huge plus in my book. I mean, even if we just signed him just to punch Mike Dunleavy again, that'd be fine with me.
Yeah, you get your game check, go out there, put him out of his misery, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, so here we sit as we record 5 days before the trade deadline. I imagine I'm going to post this. This will go online either on Valentine's Day or Monday. So people are going to have time to listen to this during the week before the trade deadline. And depending what happens, we might be right back out there recording another episode right after the trade deadline here in 5 days.
Yeah, we're exploring the possibility of doing a live trade deadline show. Pay attention to the Facebook feed for Buck Life if you're not...
Facebook, Twitter, we'll put it out there. I've got to explore the technicalities behind it, see what sort of... it's a technical issue whether I can get it worked out in the next 5 days while also celebrating Valentine's Day with my wife and all that. So, we are exploring the possibilities of expanding to be able to record live episodes, not only for the trade deadline but then potentially draft. Big events going forward. So we'll see what it will come at some point in time. Potentially right after the draft. And I know, Jake, you're working till 9 o'clock that night, so it might be...
At 9 o'clock.
Yeah. You're working at 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
Oh, so you're off?
Oh, yeah. We can make it happen if we need to.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see what happens. Watch Facebook, watch Twitter. We'll put the word out if it's going to happen. And if not for the trade deadline, I'll make a promise to get it working at least for the draft.
For sure. And speaking of the draft and the trade deadline, please, Bucks, find a way to get Grayson Allen. Guys, look at his stuff on YouTube. I mean, watch his games for Duke. He's the guy. If you can find a way to get him and Jakob on the same team, I'm back in love with the Bucks, head over heels again. So, thanks for listening, guys, and maybe we'll catch you on Thursday. If not, soon after.
And I have to say, I am not as high on Grayson Allen as Jake.
Well, he's an idiot.
I think he's an okay player.
Chuck hates white people.
Yeah, well, that is true, but that's self-loathing for you. Anyways, have a good one. We'll see you soon, and stay warm if you're in Milwaukee. And if you're in Australia, fuck you.